Alright, hey everybody, it's Professor Diffley. This is History 100, Chapter 12. This is the third and final video for this chapter, lecture videos. So here we are, starting off with Louis the Ninth. We had just talked about the weakening of the empire in the previous slides. And so, Louis the Ninth, the new ideal of kingship. So this is how Louis had his own style here. The most successful of these kings were the ones that were, as it says, content with smaller, more manageable kingdoms. And they were called stay-at-home monarchs. What they meant was the king was now viewed here in this model as Louis will show, is as an administrator, taking care of his people, his territory, rather than being a king who is trying to conquer as much territory as possible. So they're called stay at home, which makes them sound like almost like do nothing. They're not conquering, but they are administering their realms, and that is the focus, and that's the new ideal of the kingship here. And you see this with Louis the Ninth here. He's viewed as a just father, a fair judge, arbitrator, that sort of thing. And so, I mean, later he's canonized. He's made into a saint, St. Louis, there. So he imposed his laws, over France. And again, how do you get this idea of just father? By actually being the judge and trying to do right by his people. He saw these powers of royal power and ecclesial as the church as complementary rather than one as over the other. So he tries to meld those together. Again, the concept of synthesis there. But that is the kings that were going to do best. They weren't wasting blood and treasure on trying to conquering. They're instead making their own realms stronger. And so, obviously, his canonizing, you can see here, this is a depiction of Blanche of Castile. Later, so this is as you can see, where Louis' reign ruled. You still have a lot of the Ile-de-France, the royal domain there, mostly around Paris, but it includes Orleans. It's down there in the Languedoc, all the way up through Flanders, Normandy, Poitiers, and all that. So again, you can still see the English control here in that, but this is he focused more on again just administering, taking care of that territory rather than trying to conquer all of this area over there. So birth of representative institutions. There on the right you see the Parliament in England, in London. So the medieval orders, so the way they had these they divided society into orders. These were like classes. So you had three of them, and especially comes later. You see this especially in France. But the first two orders were the clergy and the nobility. They were the first and second. And then the third order would be the commoners, everybody else. So obviously the third class is, usually 95-97% of the population. The first two orders were the ruling class, the clergy and nobility, and they were also the richest, largest landowners everywhere. And they generally had the political power here. And where do you get these representative institutions? Well, they come out of the king's councils, the king's advisory bodies. Even though the king is all-powerful, or the power, the sovereign, still had to ensure that people assented and we're going to go along with the rules, so they would have advice and counsel. You see this especially in the rise of the Cortes in Spain, the Spanish Cortes, first in Castile Leon. That's the oldest of them. They were those actually included townspeople as well, and so the king, especially Alfonso, tried to use them in his first year reign, used them pretty much regularly throughout his reign to ensure assent and the cooperation of the people, and so he would listen to them and take advice there. Now, they weren't like our representative institutions today, like Parliament, the House of Commons, or the House of Reps and Representatives and Senate in the U.S., where they actually make laws. Like I said, they assented to laws, which is pretty much they agreed with the new laws that the king wanted to pass. So even though this isn't what we would call today representative democracy in the sense of, again, our view of it here in the U.S., but this is still the king listening to others, taking advice, so it is a beginning of some representation. It might not be for all, but there is some there. The English Parliament, we'll see that on the next slide. So this is, and we looked at the English common law earlier. So the English Parliament broken up into two sections, the House of Lords, House of Commons there. These had Anglo-Saxon origins, again, very much in the way of King's Council, excuse me, and others coming together to give advice there. And you can see the Simon de Montfort and the birth of English Parliament in the video. That's going to be the use of that. And again, the House of Lords, House of Commons. So make sure you watch the video for that. The last thing here, the weakening of the papacy in the end. You're going to have more fighting between the different powers, the Pope and the kings. And so the fight here between Boniface the Pope and Philip the Fourth of France is going to be about who has the authority to tax the clergy. Boniface is going to say that only the Pope can, and so instructed the clergy throughout Europe to disobey the laws and not pay taxes. There's going to be use of propaganda and public opinion here. There's going to go back and forth, and even the English were used, where this was an issue for them because they're actually taxing the clergy in part to pay the wars between England and France. But if, they go back and forth on things they're going to try to push through here. The papacy is truly weakened, though, when Philip wins out and forces the Pope to go to France. And you have the Avignon papacy here, but it is really a weakening. It shows who actually does have the power there. And so the rising Signori, another thing in Italy, though, you had the people, these ground forces fighting. There's going to be constant fighting in Italy. The cities are going to become weakened. There's going to be, it's really, where they're fighting over territory and power and who's going to hold sway. So wherein you get representative institutions in France and Spain and England, here you're going to get this rise of the Signori, these great men, these powerful men who are essentially regional nobles who are going to divide and take these areas. And we saw that in one of the slides earlier when it's divided up Italy. Again, take a watch at the Mongol videos on the videos about the Mongols on Blackboard. There's going to be a significant amount, at least a fifth of the questions are coming from those videos there. You can see this is the end result of it. So the last thing, actually, this is the last thing, the Great Famine in 1315 to 1322. You had natural disasters. There was lots of rain. Crops were wiped out. The dealing with this was inept, and so it was really hard to counter this. One of the effects are climate, weather, crop failures. But also, the part of the problem was that you had all this exponential population growth the centuries before, that any crop failure was really gonna hurt there, and there were just gonna be more people to starve, unfortunately. Reactions to this, many people saw this as a punishment by God for human sins, humanity's sins. And so that's pretty much the social and political causes as well. Again, just the inability to get the food out going to lead to great suffering. So it's going to seem at the end then, the goals of the Inquisition, for some, will be strengthened there. And you can see some depictions of the famine there. And so this is what the map of Europe looks like at the end of this era that we're in. You can begin to see it taking shape. You got the Holy Roman Empire there, England. But a lot of this will change over time, but it's beginning to take a more modern shape. All right, that is it for this. We will pick up in the next module, chapter 13, going through, and it'll be the last one for the course, going through the Renaissance. All right, as always, you got any questions, let me know. Send me an email. All right, have a good one, and good luck.